The good old clap, take one.
That's right.
How many of you knew what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old? I did. I wanted to be world champion.
Hey, is there honesty involved in this podcast? Can we be honest?
You can shut your fucking lips.
And then I'll just say, put them up, what? Let's go.
He's like, you look too pretty on the wave. Get ugly.
We can talk about DMT if you want.
I thought you were boxing.
All right, so special personal episode for me today because we have my very first surfing hero, Cory Lopez, on the lineup, which is pretty surreal. So Cory, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, stoked. Thanks for having me. I'm talking Tahiti, I think, and we're talking about.
We can talk we can talk whatever you want. We go any which way. But you know, it's funny. Like I'm 38. I grew up in Orange County. My friends and I that got into surfing, we were straight into the Lost films, On the Road with Spike, and What's Really Going Wrong when we started. So you being a goofy footer and me being a goofy footer, you were kind of my guy. And we kind of didn't really cross paths. I've been here for about 15, 16 years, but you were kind of on your way out of the CT when I started doing the men's CT. And I know we've talked once or twice since then, but I'm excited to talk today.
Yeah, no, it's those days that you're talking about On the Road with Spike, that was fun times, and all those films that we made back in those days, and just traveling. You know, I didn't think it was making films, but just traveling the world back in those days was a lot of fun, and definitely a blast. And stoked that you enjoyed it, and keep the goofy footers together, right?
Yeah, we have to. Although it seems like they're doing really well these days on tour.
Yes. Yeah, Gabby and Italo have solidified that for us.
Now, this episode's likely going to drop after Mexico concludes, but before Tahiti. Mexico's running as we're talking. Have you been watching the event at all?
I watched a lot of it yesterday. Today I had a busy day, and I wanted to get some saltwater time myself with the kids, so we spent most of the morning at the beach, and then the road trip to the dump, which is always a nice place to go. If you want to see bald eagles, that's where they're at. as
America intended.
Yes.
Now you competed here back in 2006. You finished 9th, and you beat Poncho Sullivan and Marcelo Nunes in round 1. You beat Troy Brooks in round 3, and you went down to Taj in round 4. Have you been back to Barra De La Cruz since that event?
I was there this summer.
Oh, wow.
Kind of my first real trip back after the COVID stuff settled down. O'Neill sent me down there, ended up spending 3 weeks down there. Just couldn't leave. Scheduled for 10 days, ended up being 3 weeks. So it's a great place. We had a lot of fun. And the year you're talking about, that was special. I did 3 trips that year. And that event, the lead up to that event, the free surf, no one there, was so much fun. And then obviously the event went off, and Taj got me. So whatever. But
so
it's fun. Yesterday was fun to watch.
And you hadn't been back since the summer? It had been about 15 years?
I hadn't been there since, yes.
Wow.
And this is my first time back.
What were kind of the key takeaways between 2006 and last summer?
I spent most of my time a little further south in Barra on this trip. And we did go to Barra a couple days towards the end. It wasn't that big, so I couldn't tell what the bar is doing. The boys said the week before it was fully doing the barrel thing proper. We just surfed it kind of fun and playful, like it was, yesterday or whatever, a little smaller than that even. But my key takeaways, I mean, I don't know, the community up near Barra still seemed pretty similar to me. Selena's was a lot of fun down there. That's where we spent most of our time. And my kids, we did film the O'Neill thing, and then was having so much fun. I called some friends. I'm like, hey, can you bring the kids down? And then they ended up coming down for the last week. And, but going there and seeing Barra when you come in and you see the point when you're driving down the hill, it's, brought back a lot of memories. Obviously when Andy won, that was a lot of fun. That's a great night. I had a great party that night. It was fun.
And as someone who's competed there before, and obviously surfed it as much as you have, do you think a wave like that, are you at a disadvantage on your backhand, or do you think there's still a balance of kind of weapons, whether you're on your forehand or backhand?
When I think of Barra, I only think of the tube. So no, I think there's no disadvantage at all. I prefer to be backside in the tube there. It's way more, I can control my speed. I don't have to come out of the tube. I think regular footers, when you watch films of people surfing there, they're in and out of the tube, as I can just sit in that thing. If I'm on a perfect wave, the whole wave till it closes out. But and you see that a lot too at Teahupo'o. A lot of times Teahupo'o, I'd almost prefer to be backside for the speed of the wave, to slow yourself down. But certain waves you want to be frontside when you really got to run and gun. But all the other waves, when you need to control your speed, it's so much easier to sit on your butt backside and just drag and kind of go ebb and flow with the wave. But yesterday was different. It was smaller maneuvers. But in my head, I don't think about that. But either way, like, everyone's so good nowadays. I don't think, besides the tubes, everyone can get big moves on any kind of situation.
Right. Now, we are going to get back to kind of the genesis story of Cory Lopez and your incredible career. And I definitely want to talk about Tahiti, but I did want to pause for a second, because for someone who was arguably a tier 1 profile surfer in the 90s and the aughties, you've been kind of relatively private and out of the spotlight in the past decade, which I remember interviews from years ago when you were growing up, you kind of preferred it that way. And so I was wondering if that's been intentional.
Intentional or not, I don't know. I just really immersed myself with my children, my family, over the last number of years. And I've been getting around it more over this last year with my kids, just to kind of started competing. They actually just started competing and surfing as well. And COVID hit. So paused it for the last 18 months or however long this thing's been going on forever.
Right.
10,000
years.
Yes, I know. It's like the never ending plague. But so I'm starting to get my face in there. Like, I went to Lowers this summer for the US championships with both my kids. They both competed. So I got to see a bunch of old friends, which is fun, and
your daughter did really well, right?
Yeah. She finished second in the 12 and under girls. And, so it was really exciting to watch. My parents came down, a bunch of family that lives out there as well came down, and she was so close to getting a win too. It was pretty dang exciting. All came down to the final minute, and all the girls got a wave, and she almost got her score. It was pretty sick.
I ran into your brother Shea, again, 10,000 years, but a couple of years ago at the last Stab High, and I had worked with him when he was doing the Vans and the Surfer Mag stuff, and he was commentating kind of when I started. So we had a bit of a relationship, and we were talking about everything. And he had commented about how, Cory and I have kind of flipped, because he said that when you guys were younger, he was the really competitive one and you were kind of the free surfing guy. And he goes, Shea was like, I'm kind of a shaper, like free surfing guy, and Cory and his kids are really into competing. Is that fair?
I think so. I mean, I don't like to compete anymore. I get asked to compete quite a bit still, and I prefer not to. I'm doing a charity event. I don't know. I do it. I don't know. I think I did it at such a high level for so long. I just kind of don't want to really do it anymore.
That's fair.
A friend of mine runs a tube contest in Portugal. It's a invitational, like the one day of the year in Portugal, which is really fun. I'll do that just because it's a fun trip, and and I love Portugal and the wave. He's trying to pick the best day of the year, so it's always on fire and it's heavy too.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I did that right before COVID hit. I think that was January. Knocked myself out in my heat, so I hit the bottom pretty hard.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I don't want to push myself that hard anymore, man. I do dumb things when I compete.
I was talking to, I think you mentioned you guys live pretty close. Your neighbor Lisa Anderson on the pod a couple episodes ago, and we were talking about the Masters, and she cited Mark Richards when she answered. She said, MR said, like, I'm never going to compete in the Masters. Like, I won 4 world titles. Like, why do I have to compete again? Like, there's nothing for me to gain. Everyone else can come and like hammer me and try to beat me, and I don't get anything. And Lisa was like, yeah, me too. And it sounds like it's kind of similar, when you've competed at such a high level for so long, after a while, you get a little bit burned out.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, there's that level too. Like, do you want to compete? Do you want to put yourself in a situation? Losing's not fun. You get older. Are you as good as you were? But to me too, it's like, I give my kids a lot of my time. So I prefer my weekends with them, doing fun things, whether it's just going to the beach or skating, whatever, fishing, kind of that kind of thing too. Free surf trips I won't turn those down though. If someone calls me and says, Cory, we're going to Mexico, Puerto Rico, you name it, I'm in.
And where do you guys live now?
Well, I'm in Daytona Beach. So,
Okay.
Yep. So that's home. We're not too far from Lisa's. She's up in Ormond, about 20 minutes away from us. So we're kind of south side of town.
But you came from the Gulf Coast side of Florida.
That's correct. Yeah. I grew up in the Lake Gulf. The Gulf of Mexico is really flat. Not a lot of surf there. So then as I turned professional, started competing. I lived in California. That's when I was in San Clemente for a long time, living with Mike Riola and Matt Biolos when I first moved out there, and kind of those days. And then I actually lived with Chris Ward for a while and his family back in the day as well. A lot of couch surfing, but spent 15 years in California in San Clemente. And then when me and my wife had our children, my first daughter was born in California. We wanted to raise them back here in Florida, so we settled here. I felt this is a really good spot for waves and a great community to raise kids in. So.
People are always saying, like, they're always amazed by the quality of surfers that come out of Florida, and also the quality of surfers who are amazing in really, really heavy critical waves, considering Florida doesn't have a ton of them, but the Gulf Coast of Florida has even less of them. For someone who's maybe not initiated to the Gulf Coast of Florida and the surfing community there, could you describe it to the listeners?
So it's, there's maybe 60 days of waves a year there. Something like that, and maybe 5 of them are good. It's a lot of wind swell. You're surfing waist high, rib, chest high, wind chop. If it's 30 miles an hour and onshore, you're stoked. Like, I remember I'd be at school as a kid and it'd be blowing super hard. I'm like, my dad's about to get me out of school, because if there's waves, he's coming to class and getting me out, like taking me surfing. So being a surfer there, you got to be dedicated. So you're looking for anything you can surf, and then on the weekends, when my dad off work, we were driving to the East Coast, mainly surfing Sebastian back in those days. So, my dad's a road warrior. I can't imagine how many miles he has. He drove me and Shea to the East Coast, thousands of times.
And your dad, Pete, what was his motivation for taking you surfing? Did he just enjoy it himself, or did he have intentions of, I want them to get good at competing, I want them to be professional surfers? I
think back then that wasn't even a thought in his mind. Not like it is today with social media and all these different things.
Sure.
He didn't have any idea about professional surfing. He just wanted the kids to go to the beach and have fun and be stoked. And obviously we did the local ESAs, started those at a pretty young age. So he was putting us into contests, and he would even do them too, but never thinking professional. You know what I mean? But right. It just kind of, our careers kept going, and me and Shea kept doing well. Winning East Coast championships, winning U.S. championships, and things like that. And it never crossed my mind of going professional I think till I saw Shea get a car. All of a sudden he moved to California. It was sponsored by Billabong, and then he had a car. I'm like, how'd you get that? It was all contest money. I'm like, what? And I'm like, if he can do it, that's what I need to do. So, and yeah. Yeah, but back then, not like today, where kids are kind of bred and trained to become professional surfers. They kind of know that there's coaches. We had no coaches. We had no idea what other surfers around the world were really doing. You could kind of get a glimpse into it in the magazines here and there, but there was no kind of handbook to it necessarily.
It always strikes me as interesting, because the surfing world is so enamored by surfing siblings, whether it's the Irons brothers or the Hobgoods or the Lopez brothers or the Wright family. And they always kind of cover it as, isn't it amazing that so much talent is within one family? But having at least sat pretty close to a lot of these families and observed up close, it makes all the sense in the world, because siblings often just push each other, right? Because you kind of have this built-in competition. And if you have the talent there, then it doesn't surprise that all the brothers and sisters get really, really good. What was your relationship like with Shea growing up in and around surfing?
We were very competitive, for sure. So a lot of that's true. One, we just wanted to always be at the beach surfing together, but we always were trying to outdo each other as well. Obviously I was younger, so I had a lot more work to do, and Shea pushed me very hard. He's 3 years older than me, to the day actually. But I was always trying to keep up with him and all his friends, whatever he was into, I was trying to do at 3 years younger of an age. So that pushed me a lot. So I was thankful to have an older brother for sure. But when you look at brothers in all kinds of sports, no matter what it is, there's a lot of, you got the Mannings in football. There's so many families of really talented, you name it, baseball, all kinds of sports where there's just families that breed that sport. They breed that sport, but because we live and breathe it, surfing to me is my family. It's my everything. The beach is my life. So going there and have my kids around it is just kind of where I like to hang out. So.
Damien and CJ have sort of famously talked about how the competition between them growing up was not necessarily healthy. It was effective in that they got really good really quickly, but they were came to blows a lot and just didn't like each other for a number of years. Did that happen with you and Shea, or do you look back and consider it kind of a healthier in terms of the spectrum?
I would say 90% of it was healthy. There was some few moments where I was maybe a little more aggressive than Shea. And maybe took it too far. So that's politely saying it. But yeah, sometimes I'd push things a little too far and Shea would bother me or whatever, What
would be an example?
You could just shit back then when in the van so many hours, he could just be breathing wrong. I could get pissed off. But that's just because you're together so much and you're in the van driving back and across the state. But then competitively, it never was crazy in the competitive arena because he was always in a division older up than me. It was more just in personal life that me and him would go head to head on just dumb crap, kids growing up.
Yeah. You mentioned coming out to California. What age did you cross the country and settle in San Clemente for a bit? And what were the circumstances that brought you out to the West Coast?
So I want to say I would just turn 17. And I was switching, or maybe I was just turning probably 16, right in there. I was just switching sponsors from Billabong to O'Neill. And it was the first time I got a paycheck and had my own money. Signed a contract with O'Neill, and they gave me a salary, and I had some freedom from my parents and freedom to travel. They gave me a budget to travel and start doing events. So back then we had the PSAA, the Bud Pro Tour, and a lot of those events were all in California. So Shea was already doing them. I wanted to go out there. I grew up, Mike Grillo, one of the founders of Lost, him and Biolos, Mike grew up on the Gulf Coast as well. He was a friend of mine. He said, Cory, I got a couch, get out here, start doing these events. And, I went out there and slept on Mike and Matt's couch for 6 months, 8 months. I don't know, a year. It was a long time. And then, started doing those events. So yeah, that was kind of what got me out there. I wanted to compete. I saw my brother doing it. I wanted to do it. That's kind of where it started. Started doing those PSAs and the Bud Tour. And the following year, my 17-18 season was when I started doing the QS and traveling. And I think I did 22 events that year in the QS and qualified. So
what was, if you're 17, I mean, we talked about the differences between professional surfing now and then. Probably wasn't as robust a homeschooling opportunity if you wanted to leave and go do the tour. But when you said you left to the West Coast, what was the deal with high school? Did you finish? Did you not finish?
Yeah, my mom was a teacher, and I spoke with her about it. I go, Mom, I'm getting a paycheck now, and I've got this opportunity to go start surfing these events. What should I do? What am I allowed to do? I had to ask permission. Sure. And she told me to charge it. And I started a homeschool program. Back then, no Wi-Fi. There's no phones. It was literally carry your books around the world, mail them in. I remember being in Indonesia and mailing in stacks of papers. This is so dumb. It was so frustrating, so not fun of a program. I still watch the kids now in homeschool. It's so much. They don't even know they got it good. But yeah, so I did that for a while. Ultimately ended up getting a GED because it was just too much. Yeah.
You mentioned no Wi-Fi and no phones, and I've had this conversation so much over the last few years because I do often reflect on what you and Chris and Andy and Bruce and those guys are doing in those films, traveling, as teenagers or just outside of teenagers to places like West Oz or places like Indonesia and largely unsupervised and with no phone. It just seems like if you put any kid from today into that situation at the same age with no phone and no Wi-Fi, it would paralyze them. They'd have no idea how to navigate the world. Do you ever kind of reflect back on that and wonder how did we survive?
Yeah, even before that, I remember being 11, getting on an airplane with no, they didn't carry you around the airport back in the day.
Right. Yeah.
They didn't you didn't pay an extra fee and a person that worked for the airlines take you from point A to point B. You just had to go find where you're going. So my first trip, I think I was 11 or 10 by myself on a plane, it's going across the country and into Hawaii. But it, you had nothing. And then you got like going to Europe, like you said, no phones, no nothing. Me and Wardo, 17 years old, going to Europe, land in Lisbon. How do we get to the beach? So you're reading a map. They somehow gave us a car. I have no idea why they'd give us 17-year-olds a car, but they did back then. And so you get, it was fun times. I wouldn't change it for the world to have those experiences and that sense of adventure, like true adventure, where you're just, you get there, you land in a foreign language country, you don't speak any of it, and you just kind of go exploring and start trying to find the beach and find the waves and ultimately the contest site. So
even in the 15 years or 16 years I've been doing this, it's changed so much, but it does feel like you had the opportunity to be so much more present. Even when I started, like same deal where they're like, okay, here are the event dates, like book your own travel, and you go somewhere, you don't speak the language, you don't have a smartphone, the Wi-Fi is impossible to find. So you're actually forced to be present with whoever you're talking to, wherever you are, like occupying your time, compared to now where you're like, oh, I could just be patched into my phone, like listening to a podcast or, on maps or whatever. I don't actually have to engage with anyone around me now. And I do feel like that's a bummer because it felt so much better when I first started.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, enjoying all that time and just adventuring. But, and like me and Warda too, like, so we would travel and do the stuff. And then I owed a lot of what I did when I was young to guys like Shane Beschen, Dino and Dino, who did help bring us on the road and do a lot of those events, Derek Ho, those kind of guys. We traveled with Kaipo Akias back in those early days on tour, really laid the foundation for me, and what I did and showed me the ropes. So I was lucky to, I always be trying to jump on flights that Beschen had because I knew I could find a beach if I was with him for sure.
And when you were that age, were you thinking, well, yeah, no, I want to get on the CT because that seems like a better lifestyle? Or were you just kind of looking at it and saying, I can't believe someone's going to pay me to go to Australia or Europe or Indonesia. And yeah, there's a contest that kind of justifies why I'm going. I'm curious as to what your mindset was as like a teenager. Were you hyper-focused on qualifying, or were you just like, this is amazing and competition is sort of a means to an end?
Yeah, at first it was just, I did get to go on a couple of amazing trips. I remember when I got O'Neill right when I signed with him, sent me on a trip with Cody Graham and Todd Chesser to Indo. And I was 16 years old. I'm 44. It was a long time ago. So that was an amazing trip. And we got in this little crappy boat and we ended up at deserts, and we didn't know about all the different variables, but we had a blast, and we were on, just me, Cody and Todd, and it was a lot of fun. And then same year I got to go to Canary Islands. So those are free surf trips. That was, to me at first, that was like the pinnacle. I got to go Indo and Canary Islands all in the same year, being barreled out of my mind. But then I started seeing Shea qualified. 1996, they had the G-Land contest. I saw what was going on. I was like, that was the year I really saw that. And I'm like, I got to qualify. They're having G-Land again in 97. I got to be there. And I qualified and got to go there. So it was cool.
It is funny, like even with the Mexico event happening right now, like it's not the 2006 conditions. Waves are so good. There's probably some of the best waves they've had all year to compete in. And I often think back on all those events where you only got the version that the fans got of the event was 3 to 6 months later in a magazine, like 15 pages of photos. And you're just looking as a kid, you're looking at these photos saying, this place just must pump. It must have just been pumping the whole event. Like it's amazing, amazing, amazing. And you don't, because there's no webcast, you're not exposed to things like lulls or like lay days or anything. And you're just like, man. And so I do think there's a little bit of dissonance in terms of fandom when people are like, oh yeah, Mexico's okay. It's not as good as it could be, but it's like, dude, it's pumping. Like that's what this is. That's just what surfing is.
No, yeah, like yesterday was good waves. And like you said, maybe the best waves all season so far. That stuff, that Australia leg was pretty poor this year, unfortunately. But so like Mexico was fun yesterday. And I haven't seen it today, but hopefully it's going off.
When did you mentioned knowing Mike Riola from growing up on the Gulf Coast. When did you start riding Mayhem surfboards?
So yeah, I was riding Xanadu's when I was sleeping on his couch at first. I think the first maybe for 6 months I was living in his house. I was on Xanades, which was kind of weird. And then
he never said anything where he's like,
well, he was getting boards going, and they're trying to grow a business. I don't know if they even had the cash necessarily to give me boards. They're trying to build a business, and if you have 2 young kids that break boards every other session, it's a lot to support. Wardo back then, he was a big young kid, so he'd bust through equipment. So yeah, it was like about 6 months later. Must have been 94, 95, something like that I started riding his boards. Oh, I didn't turn this thing on, did I?
That's all good.
That's my dad. Sorry, Pete.
Cool. So we're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to dig into life on the championship tour. All right. So you get on the Mayhems, you're traveling around the world, you're riding for O'Neill, which must have felt nice because you got away from Billabong where your brother was riding. You qualify for the championship tour in 1997. Was there any difference between what you expected the tour to be like in your first few years versus what the reality was?
I wouldn't say that I had any expectations. Beschen filled me in pretty well. I spent a lot of time with Shane back in those days. He was kind of my travel partner, especially that first year on the big tour.
And did you guys form a relationship just living in San Clemente together? Was there anything else?
Yeah, we started just surfing together in San Clemente quite a bit, and just similar interests. Obviously he's going to the beach, but a lot of similar friends all through San Clemente. Mm-hmm. Shane took me under his wing, and it was amazing to have him as kind of my mentor in those days onto the tour, to kind of bridge that gap from the QS onto the tour, kind of show me the ropes. Obviously Shane was real close with Derek, so I got to travel with Derek quite a bit that year. He said guys like Kaipo, Poto, Vatia David, a number of other older guys that were on tour that I got to learn a lot from. So, but yeah, the tour, I didn't know what to expect. I know G-Land fired that year. It was unreal. I was in heaven. It was so good. It was too good for my heat. I blew it. I was like, as good as I've seen waves, I just wanted to go the biggest set I could, and ultimately just couldn't make one because every wave was going was way too radical. So,
a lot of the men and women on tour today, and really over the last decade, always include you in terms of their list of surfers who influenced their approach. And in a lot of ways, that was the story of you on the championship tour as well, is that it felt like your approach was a little bit ahead of its time in the sense of being rewarded for, hyper progressive surfing, above the lip surfing, blending that with full power and tube riding. Did you ever bristle at that when you were on tour? Did you feel like, oh man, like the competitive sport has not caught up to where surfing is going?
Yeah, I think I've definitely was in that. I was in that with Shane a lot because, you remember Shane pushing the airs,
of course,
that. And I came in and I wanted to push that with him. That was kind of like an agenda he was pushing, like progression. And I came in and that was what we would talk about. Like, how can we get gnarly? How can we do something more progressive? And start doing it in our heats, start doing airs, start doing other stuff. And the judges at the time, some of the stuff, they didn't know what to do with it. They just wanted to see 3 to the beach. We're still counting 3 waves at the time, so it was a beginning stage of the progression where it started to go. Shane was a big part of that. And then I think that I came in and definitely helped push it from what I could do, by bringing airs to my heats and bringing more progression and whips and slides and things like that.
Yeah, Shane famously had like a lot of really impactful conversations with the judging panel during his career. Did you do the same? Did you speak with the judges a lot, or did you kind of not engage with them?
I wasn't. I think I went up on the tower maybe once in my life and regretted that I even did. It wasn't a good moment. So, I leave that. Shane was the guy. He was in there trying to preach to them about how to score what's going on, and how to push things forward to get what ultimately got us here. It took 20 years, but.
And when you were on the championship tour, I might answer my question for myself here, but it feels like you were there to push your own surfing. Were there any performance results world title goals once you were on tour? Were you like, I'm here to win a world title, I'm here to win this event, I'm here to, make the top 10 or whatever? Or were you just on tour trying to surf your best?
Always show up trying to surf my best, that's for sure. There was a couple years where I felt like I might have had a chance to win one. Obviously the year CJ won, 2001, I had a chance. I actually was one heat away. That year ended at Sunset Beach, and Shane Beschen had a wild card and beat me. If I won that heat, I would have won the title. So it's CJ. There's a number of guys.
Have you spoken to him about that since?
To Shane, I don't know if I ever told him. But yeah, it was ironic. It was like the lead up, like, do I tell Shane that I just need to win this heat? And the waves sucked. It was like way too big, washed through, just 15-foot out of control sunset, and a battle of fours. Came down to Shane had 2 high fours, I had 2 low fours, and it was just bad. So that was unfortunate. But that was my chance in 2001. And there's a couple of years where I felt like I was hanging in there, like in the top 5 for part of the year, and sometimes I'd get a good start in the beginning of the year and kind of get close, maybe a victory here or there at somewhere that's barreling would have broke me through. But
were there any venues on tour during your tenure that you felt like were a bit of your Achilles heel, where you're like, oh, I never do well here, or this kind of a wave or these conditions, I know that I'm up against it?
I mean, I really like surfing Jeffreys Bay, but I just never had any luck there. But
Sure.
I didn't mind the wave. I don't know. It's just, it wasn't my forte. I think I got better at, backhand surfing as I got older and started spending more time in right points.
Right.
So,
one of the things when we talked about you being a tier 1 high profile athlete in the 90s and the aughties, was you were really neck and neck with Andy, in free surfs and in heats and in competition. And that is how it was presented to the world. But, my understanding is that you guys had a really, really close friendship, and I'm wondering how and when you guys met.
So I must have been about 13 when I met Andy. It was at the USA Championships at Diamond Head. And I remember, he tells the story. He has a much better memory than me. So I know this story because of him telling me the story. And he'd be like, I remember I heard about you, and like you came and like you had this long dyed black hair. And I was like, who is this punk? Who's he think he is? Like, come to the island. And of course, like I lost first heat. So, so I think he was stoked at the time, but we ultimately ended up meeting then briefly during that event. And then several years later in San Clemente, started surfing together more and more, and then built our relationship, started doing events together and then traveling together, of course, and then spent most of my career traveling with him. He came on the tour maybe 2 years after me, or a year and a half. I forget what his first year was. Maybe a year, just a year after me.
I think he was. I think he was 98, but then he fell off, and then he got back on. Yeah.
That's why we were kind of together and not together for a little bit, and then, must have been 2010 when he finally came on forever, or 9. Anyway, but yeah, we formed a great relationship, really close. Think about him all the time, and we had a lot of great memories with that man. So,
of course, yeah. I mean, I as I said, like the impression that everyone got was not just that you guys had a close friendship, but that you were pushing each other in the progressive realm all the time. Yes. And one of those really memorable points was, I think it was the 2003 Quicksilver Pro Final in Fiji. I think you guys were against each other, and Andy ended up winning. And I was wondering if you, maybe your memory is not as good as you think it was, but I'm wondering if you remember that final at all, and if you guys exchanged words in the water before, during, or after.
I do. I was just unpacking my stuff yesterday, moving to my new house, and I found the runners-up trophy, and
still have it.
It still burns, dude. Runner-up trophies hurt more than yours. Yeah. But my son asked what that trophy was, and I, filled him in on the story yesterday, actually. But that was a good final, and the whole event, we were just going through rounds on opposite sides of the draw and scoring big scores. But that whole day, every heat, the second wave or the first wave was the good wave the whole way. And then I started up, Andy let me get position for the first wave. And I was like, oh, sick. And every wave in that heat in the final, second wave was the one. And that's just how Andy flipped it on me. So I ended up with a couple sevens, he ended up with a couple nines. So that's how it went. But yeah, we're very competitive. If we were at Teahupo'o, it didn't matter where we were always trying to out duel each other, outmaneuver, get clips for filming. Me and him sparred together really well. We got along well on the beach, but then we sparred together really well in the water to kind of push each other surfing, especially back in those days. Ultimately, he obviously did what he did and became one of the greatest surfers of all time. So he, I think he was just a little more built for it. He had that 20 extra pounds of muscle over me and that competitive driven spirit like no one I've ever seen, that just had so much fire to go out and destroy people. Those were the levels that he took it past me and was able to accomplish what he accomplished, which was amazing.
Probably 20 to 40 pounds, depending on the year, right? Because he was up and down on the weight.
Some years. I think his fighting weight was 20 pounds more than me. Yeah.
And you ended up stepping away from the CT after a decade in 2007. Walk me through that, because I kind of remember you had a few injuries that you had to work through, but I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, that year I had some ankle issues going on, and I don't think that was anything that cost me. I actually did good in a couple of those events. I had my hurt ankles. But then it ultimately came down. I needed to make one heat again. Comes down to pipeline event. I was feeling really confident. I have Luke Stedman training for Big Surf out at Pipe, and unfortunately, it was waist high off the walls where they held the contest. I'm talking waist high off the wall, and I lost. So I fell off tour. I think it was a blessing in disguise. I don't think I'd be where I am today had I maybe made that heat. So I just look at it as what it was meant to be. Ended up raising 3 beautiful kids and back home in the Sunshine State and enjoy it. But falling off 2007 wasn't that bad because O'Neill supported me to go travel and have an amazing time just chasing waves. So.
Yeah, and it feels like you had laid the groundwork to be able to flex in and out of competitive surfing and free surfing from the very beginning, because you're putting out a ton of video content. You were great on editorial. And I remember like almost immediately after you stepped away from the tour, not that I don't think you discovered the wave, but you certainly put it on the map, the Skeleton Bay wave, one of the first ones that really broke the internet, right? That was pretty quick after you stepped away from the CT.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact year, but I think it might have been right around 2008, right? That probably was.
Yeah.
But yeah, we, went there on that trip with Pete Mendia, Evan Slater, Mitch Colburn, and Hank Gaskell. A couple of photographers, and one of the guys actually found it on Google Maps. I forget his name, Mark or something like that.
Oh, that was right. It was the Google.
It was the
Google search maps thing wave, right?
Yeah. So that's how the wave was discovered. Was that it was a Google Maps surfing magazine did a contest, and whoever found a great wave on Google Maps would surfing magazine go do a trip there, and you get to go for free. So we went there. It was amazing. And we saw the point. Unfortunately, the wave doesn't break that often. And we had to spend a month there to get it to break. But, the next one will do it. And then finally it broke. So, and then when you see it break, it's like nothing you ever seen before, especially for being the first people to ever surf it. Like just the fact that no one was there was mind blowing. So
you were riding a different board, if I remember, like I think it was the Monkfish or something.
The Monkfish, right? Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I rode the Monkfish and just had some fun. Yeah. But that was, yeah. And we can get into this next a little bit, but like I love watching elite CT surfers surf Ferrari equipment, and whether it's a fish or a single fin or whatever it is, it's so rad to see like the top talent in the world ride different equipment and draw different lines. And that's obviously something that you're synonymous with because of the 5.5 by 19 1/4 movement between you and Chris with Matt Biolos. And
it doesn't seem like you were ever that like, what's the word? Like fundamentalist about your equipment where you're like, I have to ride my Ferrari thruster all the time. It feels like you were open to experimenting quite a lot.
Yeah, I think I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the variety of surfing and different maneuvers you could do. And of course, that was all based on Matt too, just coming with these boards and ideas of stuff that he wanted to do. And he had me and Wardo there in his backyard, and he was like, hey, you guys ride these? And we're like, got on. We're like, wow, that's amazing. Like we can surf so different and just draw all these new lines. And it just felt really creative. It felt like you're just playing with something all new. It's like a fresh toy, and then sometimes you get on those boards and you don't want to get off those boards. And then, I've seen the ebb and flow in my life, in my career. You get hyper focused on competition. You get focused in on those Ferrari boards, as you're calling them, your high performance thruster. And then when you finally get back on the other board and you're like, now I don't want to get off this. I just rode, was it last year? I rode a fish for a year straight. I got 3 sessions in a year. They're on a different board. So I rode, and my goal, is we were kind of morphed into this. This was off the stock board I just grabbed at Real Water Sports up in Outer Banks. And I got on this fish. It's 5'5", 19 1/4. It's actually 5'6". And I got on it and started riding. I loved it so much. I just rode every session. And all of a sudden, I'm like, God, it's been like 5 months I've been on this board. And now became a game. How long can I ride it before it dies? I was riding it this summer, and that was over a year. So it was like a long, long time.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
In addition to the alternative equipment, you are one of the people that redefined how to surf Tahiti and Teahupo'o. We mentioned this is going to be dropping probably after the end of the Mexico event, but ahead of Tahiti. I wanted to talk to you about that. When was the first time you went to Tahiti, and what are your memories of that wave?
So it must have been like 94 or something like that. Because whatever year it was, I was supposed to graduate regular high school because a friend of mine graduated and wanted to go on a trip before they started college. And I'm like, well, meet me in Tahiti. I'm going. I'll be there like next week. And
what were you going for? Was it like a photo trip or?
Yeah, I had my other buddy. We were just gonna go. Well, we heard about it. We seen some pictures and we heard about the end of the road in Teahupo'o, and we just wanted to go there. And had no idea where we're going. Of course, back then there wasn't much information. You've seen a couple photos in magazines, and you kind of heard rumblings about this wave at the end of the road. It's a crazy barrel, and that was why I wanted to go. And so I went there, and with some friends, we stayed on the wrong side of the island. Had no idea where the wave was. We stayed right by the airport, and all of a sudden we're like, crap, it's like the wave's an hour and a half away. So anyway, that was my first time. Figured out where the wave was and never stopped going back for a long time. That was fun.
I appreciate the humility with which you I figured it out and never stopped going back. But I'm going to pause you there because I mean, you and maybe one or two other people throughout those years were the only ones that were comfortable taking off where you took off, taking the lines that you took. And is that just something that you feel like you were naturally comfortable with from the very beginning, or did you take time to figure it out? Did you kind of have to work through some fears and doubts? Because I mean, even as recently as the last few years, when you're talking about championship tour surfers going to Teahupo'o who haven't been a lot, it's a very intimidating thing, and they're not comfortable sitting where you sat 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's one of the scariest waves in the world for sure. And luckily, I had that first trip to kind of get warmed up to it, and I started going every year. I would spend a lot of time there, so I would go, and it wasn't strange for me to be there for a month at a time.
Right.
And just when you're down there, you're mostly surfing that wave. So I put in a lot of time. I wasn't back then. I was young. Didn't have that fear or didn't think about things like that, like what the wave could do to you. I knew it could hurt my flesh, but never thought that it could, it could kill you or do something crazy like that. Even though we know that can happen, and it actually did happen back in those days. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it's just, that wave I was all about that wave. And I love the West Bowl. I love the beginning of swells when it's coming up more west and it's coming out of the channel. It kind of looks like a closeout, and you're like, oh, is it a closeout? And you get this feeling of like, I might screw up if I go in this wave, but if I don't go and it spits, I'll be pissed, you know? So yeah, it's fun. And we had a lot of learning to do back then. When I first started going there, people were riding longer boards. I remember I used to pack 7.0s in my board bag. And I quickly learned that 7.0 kind of sucks out there. But you got guys like, when they first started having that Gotcha Pro, you got guys like Liam McNamara out there on big boards, you know, and paddling in, and he would glide into some of them for sure. But those ones that feather up and, you know, that just suck up and go into that inside bowl, like you're not making on that kind of board. And the speed to ride a board that length in the barrel. The wave sucks so hard off the bottom. When you have all that rail, the board wants to pull back and slow down. So that's what I learned quickly as I was riding the bigger waves, that my longer boards were not conducive to coming out of the barrel, because they would just slow down. They had all that rail dragging, and the waves suck so much water out that you go backwards with the long rail. So I quickly like broke those boards because I was falling, and then nothing left but shorter boards. I'm like, these shorter boards are so much better. So that, you know, we learned a lot there, and the kids nowadays ride like tiny boards out there. You know,
when you were going there, I just think it's cool that, I mean that life and I guess professional surfing's changed so much that back in the day you had the freedom to say, yeah, I'm spending a month in Tahiti because I love this wave and I want to get good at surfing it. And you sometimes hear that. Like, I remember Mick used to do that when he struggled with those kind of waves on his backhand. He would spend, 4 to 6 weeks at the spot just to kind of get better at it. With the women returning to Teahupo'o for the first time in, I think, 15 or 16 years, for a lot of the women who've never been there, haven't surfed it that much, your father, you probably give your kids advice on surfing. What kind of advice would you give to the young women that are going there for the first time, or even some of the young men who probably haven't been there that much?
Just watch your peers and people that have been there and see how they approach it and try to study that. It's you can't have the fear in you that you're going to get hurt, obviously, because then you probably will. But sit inside, paddle hard, hold on. but it's yeah. I think I'm excited to watch the girls. I think some girls are going to really surprise us. They're going to push themselves. It's going to be fun. It's exciting. It scares the crap out of my daughter. She's like, Dad, they're going to Chopes and Pipeline. She's like, she's 12, but
she's
great.
got her eyes on being a pro surfer.
She does. Yeah. She has a very competitive drive. She wants to do it. She loves watching. We were watching yesterday, the women surf, and always rooting for Caroline. We got her brother lives right down the street from us, not too far. So we're big Marks fans, and yeah. You
guys are going to have to start spending a month in Tahiti again.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I got some time. I still got some time. That's why I was like, my son's like, Dad, when can I go to Skeleton Bay? He wants to go so bad. He's been asking me for years already. I'm like, dude, I'll be like, you're 8. And then he's 10 now, but like, he's been asking me since he was 8. Like, Dad, when do I get to go to Skeleton Bay? I'm like, dude, like, you wait, bro. Like, you'll get there. But I don't know.
When you were pushing yourself in those years, when you were there for a month at a time or at the event, who were, as I said, it does feel like there's a huge gap between some of the people that really take to Teahupo'o and the rest of what we're calling the world's best surfers, because they are, but it is just amazing that there's a level to it. Who were some of the people that were in your camp as really sort of pushing the boundaries at Teahupo'o?
In those early days, obviously it was Andy, Kobe Aberton, Bruce. I remember Conan Hayes getting some amazing waves out there. The one year I had I think it was him and Kobe battled in that final of the qualifiers to get into the contest. You had Malik, who was amazing out there. I remember watching that one wave that he rode to live, which at the time was the biggest wave ever ridden there, and still arguably one of the tallest waves. Those guys all pushed me hard. You had Poto doing his thing out there back in the day. Manoa, all those guys. Manoa was like so smooth out there, like silky smooth. He was like, I don't know, must have been like the Bentley of the wave. I don't know what you want to say. But that guy, he was the most gnarly situation. He looked so calm and smooth. He was a really awesome person to watch on such an intense wave, and how his calmness an approach to it was, as then you have Andy that was just so aggressive to the wave.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And
so beautiful too, but like,
yeah. I mean, even so in you mentioned you stepped away from the tour at the end of 2007. Andy had his sabbatical. He came back in 2010. Tahiti is one of those events I've been fortunate enough to go to for 10 years. And the 2010 year was the first year. Actually, I'd been there a bunch when Andy was there, but it was the first year I remember being out in the water like with him on the day before I think we finished, which had kind of small waves. And in the afternoon, there were just little waves and there weren't any pros out. So we went out and surfed for a bit. And then right on dark, it started to kind of pulse and, a big boat came in and, all the big dogs came out like Kelly and Mick and whoever was still in the event at the time. And I remember kind of paddling to the channel and just watching them all and being really impressed. And then I remember just that difference, like watching Andy compared to someone like Kelly or compared to someone like Mick or CJ or whoever else is out there and just being like, I can't believe he's a level above all these people. Like, but he just had such an ease and like a relationship with the wave that it was really stunning to watch in person.
Yeah. You name all these great surfers, right? And super talented, but when it's 4 to 6 feet too, it's everyone kind of play with it and dabble with the wave and ride the wave the way you want it, manipulate what you're doing. But when you really saw in the sessions I was speaking of earlier, where obviously I'm only thinking 10 foot plus, barely rideable. Those days where you're pushing the boundaries of paddling, surfing out there. And that's where my pinnacle of who is the best out there was those guys who could ride the wave when it was as dangerous as it gets and still handle it. Obviously CJ Hobgood, the wave he rode, Damien always attacked it too, guys I left out. A lot of guys I probably left out, but I remember just watching Andy on some of the sessions, just mad dogging it and controlling it, making 90% of his waves. So his approach and he'll go back to, and he would have told you like the thing, he didn't want me to outdo him. He'll tell you, I've heard him say this. He's like, I wasn't letting you outdo me out there today, and he would be pissed if I got a bigger wave, if I got a bigger wave or a deeper barrel, it was all about the bigger wave. It wasn't about, who got the bigger wave, barely made it, there's definitely some machoism in it, like, men being men and, you gotta, I don't know. There's that battle.
Yeah.
It was fun. I loved it. That's what we kind of lived for back then.
Yeah. And I mean, of course there's a machismo to it, but it's also kind of how males relate to each other sometimes, so it sounds like especially between you and him, there was a lot of like love that drove that. And, it was amazing to be there and watch him win that event, and so sad when he passed away a couple months later. I was in Puerto Rico when it happened. Where were you when you heard about Andy's passing?
I was in an airport and just coming home from Skeleton Bay, and just landed and Alec Parker told me. He was on the plane with me, and he somehow caught news. I was actually, as he was telling me, I was listening to voicemails from Andy. But I just landed and we were on a plane for, a zillion hours. I land and I have voicemails like, I'm in Miami, like come meet up. Cause he thinks Florida, he thinks I live by Miami,
Great, yeah.
It's all one place.
Can drive there in a day. Yeah.
Yeah. It's 4 hours from my house, but I'm right there down the street. So yeah, it was like surreal. I literally had him voicemails on my phone, listening to him as my buddy was like looking at me, like trying to tell me something. I'm like, it was just put the hoodie on,
Yeah.
Unfortunate, like worst day of our lives. Yeah.
Yeah. So. And, processing that over the last several years, did you, because you guys were so close, did you ever have to kind of seek professional help or speak to somebody about it to kind of work through what had happened?
No, I didn't. I guess maybe I'm pretty strong that way, but I'm a very emotional person. So yeah, I definitely cried about it. It was tough. It was not fun. Took a while for that pain to kind of go away. And, I was thinking about another night, just musical come on song. Someone remind me of him. And I'm like, it just breaks my heart thinking of not being here, so.
Music's insane like that. Like this way it triggers, like it could trigger like a day, in your life when a song comes on, you're like, oh my God, like I didn't know I'd associated that song with that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Mostly it just breaks my heart that, I just wish that he could do what I'm doing now, which was raising a family. He was just about to have a son. The song came on the other day and I was just listening to the words and I was like, he never got to do this. Like, it just really pisses me off. Life is life, man.
Yeah, but I'd imagine I'm a father too. I've got a boy and girl twins. They're 7, and for speaking personally, like it's the purpose it gives me is like it gets me through a lot. So I'd imagine that's been a wonderful thing for you to pour yourself into.
Yeah, the kids keep you occupied. They keep you busy, and we actually owe Andy for one of ours. So anyway, it's good. So we miss them tremendously, and the kids are fun. So yeah.
Well, we got a couple more topics, and we definitely have a bunch of listener questions that came through, but we narrowed it down to 3. But we're going to take one more quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and we'll be back soon. So in 2021 and moving forward, we've redesigned how we're determining the world champions with the WSL finals. So the top 5 men and the top 5 women from the regular championship tour season will compete at a one-day event in a linear format. And the winner on the day will have to win the world title against the best of the season and in the water. I'm not sure if you've been across that yet, but I'm curious to learn your thoughts on that.
Really excited about it. I think that it's going to be a great event to watch as a fan of surfing. I think if I was an athlete, it might upset me a little bit, but I don't sit in those shoes anymore. If you're like one of those athletes that kick butt like Gabby this year, you're like, crap, I still got to go and earn it on the last event of the year when I should have this giant lead. But I think for fans, for us, we're going to be super pumped to watch this day and all the levels of just the intensity of what's going to be on each surfer. Kind of reminds me of what NASCAR did like 10 years ago where they broke it down. They used to, same thing, NASCAR guys would win maybe 10 races left and it was over. Same thing that we've been experiencing for, the whole history of surfing. But now to have it all come down to the last day, it will be really a lot of fun.
I've told this story a lot on the podcast, but I, was sort of the chief skeptic inside the building because this conversation was happening for years. And I said, look, I've got like legitimacy issues. Like if you do it this way, is it is that as valuable as the way we used to do it, et cetera, et cetera. And during the event in Fiji, I want to say it was like 2017 or around there, we had a meeting with all the world champs and all the people who had kind of been in contention, who'd finished like 2nd and 3rd over the last few years, and got them in a room and talked about this. And I was shocked because to a person, they were like, yeah, no, that sounds awesome. I want to win the world. I don't want to win the world title like sitting on the beach. I don't want to win the world title like sitting on the couch. Like I want to win it in the water and I want to beat the next person. Like that's how I want to win it. And I said, oh, wow. Well, if you guys feel that way, then interesting. It's gotten interesting as we've gotten closer to it to kind of listen to people like be excited about it or listen to people be a little bit skeptical about it. Now, the way the format works is, 4th and 5th surf in the first heat. The winner surfs against number 3. The winner surfs against number 2. And then the winner of that surfs in a best 2 out of 3 against number 1. If you were still on tour and you were in the WSL Final 5, which spot would you want to be and why?
Oh, I mean, obviously you want to be in a top spot and just waiting for someone else to come up to you. I mean, that's the ultimate spot to be in and have your 2 out of 3, for sure. But then there could be that momentum thing. Who knows? All the top 5 guys are going to be able to win a world title. They're going to be that good. They're going to be the best surfers in the world. Either any of them can beat the other person on any given day. I'm pretty sure that's what we'll end up with at the end of the year. Some great surfers. If we don't, that guy just got lucky to get there. But it should be all of our very top guys, and it should be great. So I'm pumped on it. The halfway cut thing, I'm not a fan of it all, though. I'll tell you that much.
Oh yeah, go on.
I think the halfway cut thing is a joke. I don't think that your career should be decided in the first half. And you might say, oh, it's not your career, but yeah, you're going back to the QS. And when you are missing these, we all have our specialties in surfing, right?
Right.
But so if you're missing out on some waves that are your specialty, or these are your spots, now you didn't get a chance to hit it, but that might have been where you would have hit gold,
Right.
So I get what they're trying to do, bring more drama and action to it. That's what the Final Five thing did. I think that's going to do a great job. It'd probably be the most watched event in history of surfing, potentially. I think the halfway cut will make that last event important for some people, and more people might tune in. I don't think it's all about ratings, right? And I don't know.
Yes and no. I totally agree with what you're saying too. Like some people are just gonna be like, man, I'm not gonna hit my straps until I get to G-Land or Lowers or Rio or J-Bay or Tahiti,
Yes.
right? I think it's not just about ratings. I think part of it too is also getting the field down to a window where you can run in a single swell cycle, because that's going to challenge for us too. But it'll be interesting to see, right? And it is one of those things too. I think when it happened back in 2011, I don't necessarily think those are apples and apples, but there was no Challenger Series to fall back onto, where it was just you're just kind of off the map. You're back on at the QS, and now there's a Challenger Series. It's got pretty good venues, and so it's now a 3-tier system. But yeah, we'll see how it pans out.
As an athlete though, your contracts will be based on what
totally
you're surfing in. So it's when you fall back, you might have just lost $100,000 or whatever the number is for each athlete.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, totally. Yeah.
So to me, those are like big things. You're basing your life around this, but all of a sudden you're like, crap. Now that first half isn't really my favorite half. Anyway, I won't go too deep in it. I didn't like the first time in 2011 when they did it.
I didn't like it either, and I was in the building. It's like this is not gonna be hard.
It's funny because
yeah.
No, I moved in, I was going through old books, and I had a book where all the guys on tour, like not all of them, but a lot of guys on tour signed this petition trying not to have that happen, the halfway cut back then. And I don't know what the feeling is in the building now with the surfers. Obviously they signed off on this, so it's their choice. My opinion does not matter. It's my opinion. It's like, whatever, but.
A couple things. I think your opinion does matter for sure. The second thing is, yes, all these changes obviously have to be done in concert with the surfers group. But it's interesting, especially when it gets to things like this with the cut, because probably to a person, even if they vote one way, in their heart of hearts, they're like, well, I'm about surviving. I don't want to make it harder to survive. So this becomes real challenging for me.
It gets hard. Like, well, who would vote to fire your friend too? Like, you're like, well, I'm a top 5 guy always. I'm cool. But then forget, Tommy over there. Like, you go back to working at the docks, bro. Like, so that's where I look at it too. Like, how tight do we want to be? And I get the swell cycle thing. That's what we were sold on when we went from 44 to 32.
Right.
But then they added a round. So it didn't change our still at 4 days. And I understand, like, yeah, you're trying to get the best waves. We're, probably trying to get this thing back to what was the dream tour at one point. Now that COVID's ending and we can hopefully get back to, like next year's got some great venues, and this year too, but it's fun. I enjoy it. I love when the waves are good. I love when it's tube and I get to watch. And, so.
If you had to pick men's and women's world champions who are going to win the Rip Curl WSL finals this year at Lowers, who would you pick as of today?
I mean, just because I'm not biased, I'm going to go with Caroline. But but I mean, Carissa would be a really hard call not to call her. And then men's. I gotta even look at the ratings lately to see who's our guys that are going to make the top 5. So who's our
we've got, off the top of my head, it's Gabriel's number 1, Idola's number 2, Felipe's number 3. Oh shoot, now it's not off the top of my head. Morgan's in there. I think Morgan's at number 4, which is cool for a rookie. And then number 5 is Griffin, if I remember correctly.
I'm personally looking at, like, and before you said those numbers, I was already thinking Felipe, but I was thinking Lowers, Felipe, with Griffin being the local. He's so amazing there too. I would go with those 2.
All right. I like the picks.
Yeah.
Well, so I mentioned we put some questions out to the Instagram community, and we got a bunch back, but we did whittle it down to 3. So the first question is from I Am Matson, which is, what are some of your favorite memories from your surf sessions with Andy Irons? Maybe just give us one that stands out to you.
I think when I took him to Skeleton Bay for his first time, and I think it was the only time, maybe. I don't remember if he went out again. And that's when he's going through some troubles. And he got out there and he just thanked me. He's like, thank you so much for bringing me here. This is what surfing's all about. I'm so stoked. And he had the best day. We had the best day. We just got barreled all day. The beer at the end of the day never tasted so good on the dock. You know, it was just awesome. It was just a great time. And to see him so happy, and I knew he'd been struggling, and to see him so stoked and that joy and just full of life, that was a really, really special trip and day. So
I love it. Second question is from Yannick DeBuff, which is, if you could surf a heat today with 3 guys from your days on the CT, who would they be and where would you surf?
I'd probably like from all the events we had, I would probably just pick G-Land, and I'd just surf with my brother and Beschen and Andy. My boys. We just have so much fun. It would be unreal. Can we throw Wardo and Bruce in too? 6
Yeah, sure. Why not? Yeah.
Grom days.
Keep going. Last question from the Instagram community. I'm going to screw this name up. Aniskovmand. I'm sorry. What are some of the ways that surfing has made you a better person?
Some of the ways surfing has made me a better person.
Mm-hmm.
I think, back in the day when I was doing professionally, and little kids would be stoked on you. Just being kind to them and giving them your time, whether it's signing an autograph or talking to them in a lineup. I do a Grom event here. Haven't done it since COVID, but I used to do a Grom event every year. And just giving back to the kids like that. I think that's a lot. Anything you can do, like charity based with your surfing, I think is big. Whether it's cystic fibrosis stuff that I've worked with those guys a number of times, all that stuff. But the kids, I love helping the children surf and keeping them stoked and being in the water and just playing.
That's awesome. All right, we're now down to our final segment, which is the lightning round presented by Michelob Ultra Pure Gold. These are 10 questions. Answer as fast as you can. First question. If you could only have one board setup for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
A thruster.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Burrito or pizza?
Burrito.
Last book you read?
I don't know. Dance with Los in 4th grade.
Best surf film ever?
Performers.
One wave you never have to go back to?
Bacchio.
If you only got to surf one wave for the rest of your life?
Mundaka, as best as it gets.
Yeah, both in Spain. That's pretty good. That's not too bad.
Yeah, because you're sold in a dream of Mundaka.
Your head's there,
and then your heat ends up being at Bacchio, and you're like, why am I not at Mundaka? But
yeah, I missed that event for just that whiplash. That was always fun.
Yes.
The best person to share the lineup with?
Maybe Pat O'Connell.
Okay. Worst person to share the lineup with?
Oh, maybe Tom Carroll back in the day.
I hear it's still pretty bad. So, last one. Finish this sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by.
Wait, I was laughing about Tom
There
Carroll doesn't get mad at me.
So it's like that Instagram thing where it's like Tom Carroll's not real, he can't hurt you, and then it's like Tom Carroll pops up.
Like, he's gonna kill me. So wait, what was it?
I'm sorry. So last one. Finish the sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by.
Just taking my kids surfing. Let's go to the beach. Water's crystal clear right now. It's like an aquarium, so I'm gonna be there in the morning.
That's awesome. Cory, thank you so much for coming on the lineup, man. It's a personal treat for me, and I hope we get to talk more, and I hope we get to see you more very, very soon.
Yep, cool. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.